Hello, my name's Dr. Martin Khechara and I'm an Associate Professor for Engagement in STEM at the University of Wolverhampton, and I'm also part of the STEM response team. I've been an academic for probably about 12 years now, and every year I see hundreds and hundreds of pieces of written work from my students. And one of the biggest mistakes that people make is that they don't edit or proofread their work properly, and actually that builds in mistakes which then of course they lose marks for. So in this study skills session I want to just run you through some really good tips, some nice hints and some processes for doing better editing and proofreading of your written work at any level. So you know, why bother in the first place? Why bother to actually proofread your work? Why bother to edit it? You know, it's good enough, surely. You can just submit it. Well, of course, that isn't the actual case, is it? Because often there are mistakes that are built in during the writing process, and we'll highlight some of these in this short session today. You will definitely think that your work is good enough when you're in a rush. If you're on a tight deadline, you need to get your work in as fast as you can. But that's all about time management and organisation, which is a subject really of another study skills video for another time. So I think this is a really, really poignant thing. You know, actually the best writer isn't that person that can dash out, you know, can write a quick draft and submit it and pass with a mediocre mark. It's the person who's best at editing and proofreading their work, which they could submit in plenty of time and get a good mark. So editing and proofreading is absolutely essential to your writing process. It does lots and lots of things, particularly for the person reading. So what it does, it sort of develops trust in your reader, in as much as they believe in what you are saying because it sounds credible and it's backed up by proper evidence, and we'll come back to that. It shows you care about your work because you've taken time and effort to make it as good as you can. It shows that you care about the reader, again, because you've made the effort. And above all, and this is really, I suppose, one of the most important things for all our people learning out there, is the fact that if you do it properly, you will get better grades. So there is quite a difference between editing and proofreading, and this slide just really shows a little bit of that. Actually, the editing side of thing sort of, you know, revolves around improving the flow, the accuracy of the material, things like that. And actually you can see that on this slide here. And what it is a detailed content overview, if you like, showing that you've backed up all your arguments with proper facts and things like that. Actually, proofreading is more about the nitty gritty, if you like. It's more about the actual bones of your work itself. The spelling, the writing, the punctuation, seeing that it all fits together, that you're using the right language and so on. It's a quality assurance process before you actually submit. So you can see there is quite a bit of difference there. So to start this whole process, what you need to do is you need to put yourself in the mind of the person reading your work. Okay, you need to really sort of step away from things and think, well, how will somebody else read this? And actually, you need to get yourself into a mindset where you can see the difference between what you mean and what you've actually written. Because you've written this whole thing, actually, you know what you're trying to say, but somebody reading it isn't in your mind. So they might not. So an important part of this is before you start to actually draft and proofread and edit your work, what you need to do is have a rest. Go away, go for a walk, have a biscuit, go for a run, just put it completely out of your mind over a nice cup of tea. And when you come back, you'll be there with fresh eyes and you'll start to see the problems, because of that famous saying, isn't there? You know, you can't see the wood for the trees. And actually, when you're proofreading and editing work, you won't see mistakes unless you step back from that work, all right, and put yourself in the shoes of the reader. So a really good way to start the editing and proofreading sort of process is to get your work, and using a word processing package like Microsoft Word, is actually to separate that into two columns. So you've got the writing on whatever side's comfortable for you, So for me, it would be the left-hand side of the page, and then I would have the right-hand side, allowing me to actually write notes about any problems or anything like that that I might actually need to include. So you're looking for things like, you know, does it all make sense? Is it actually backed up by facts? You know, am I just using, you know, spurious information that I've just dragged up from somewhere, but I'm not showing that actually I found it somewhere by using references and citations? And that's something I'll come to in a bit. You know, are you telling the right story? Are you signposting the reader? This is when you use words like however, or therefore, or moreover, or additionally, when you're linking different subject areas together. And above all, are the paragraphs you're using used well? Because again, this is vitally important. So, first of all right, let's get organised. All right, let's start to think about you know what we actually need to do. All right, so we've got all our work sorted, we've got it in columns, all right, and we start to think about what it needs to be like. So the actual work itself, does the title fit? Does it say exactly what we want it to say? Is the aim or purpose of your work, is it actually obvious? Are all the sections that you've included relevant to the title itself? You know, or you've just put stuff in because you thought it belonged there? You know, is the organisation of it logical? Does one thing lead to another? Do the ideas develop slowly? You know, do we start broad and move down to a more specific topic? You know, and if you didn't know anything about the subject that you were talking about, could you actually understand? And again, this is an important thing, because you do need to put yourself into the actual shoes of the reader itself. So we mentioned paragraphs before. So what about these paragraphs actually? And we need to really think about how paragraphs are structured. And I see this all the time in students' work, in that they use paragraphs that are too short, or the paragraphs are too long, or the sentences within the paragraphs are far too long. You know, when you're writing, you need to use what we call short declarative sentences. If your sentences are too long, and I like to use the sort of rule that if a sentence is more than 2 lines long, then actually it's too long. And you need to rewrite that paragraph. Now, a paragraph really should have all the things here. It should have one main idea. That idea should be stated and it should be very clear. The idea has got to be supported by facts. You don't know everything. You can't just dream it up and just put it in. All right? You need to go out and find evidence to support the premise, the idea that you've included. Do they link and follow? One paragraph should introduce the next paragraph and so on. Because remember, when you're making a piece of writing, what you're actually doing is you're creating a story that is somebody's reading. It's like it's like writing a novel, or you know, or another kind of book that somebody might enjoy to read. And actually, if paragraphs are just there and there and there and there, but one doesn't follow naturally to the other one, it makes it very hard for somebody to understand. And also, what we need to do when we're looking at paragraphs, we need to decide whether or not the punctuation is correct. And one of the most startling things is people that use commas too much or too little, but also when you decide to use things like semicolons and colons, those sorts of uses really need to be ironed out. And you can see here there's this burger diagram which I really like of the parts of a paragraph, and you can see we've got right at the top there, you've got an introductory sentence, this sort of top sentence. Then we've got the supporting details that actually back up the premise inside that paragraph itself. You're using the right sorts of vocabulary and so on. And in the end of that paragraph, you'd have a bit of a concluding sentence that then leads on to the next paragraph itself. So, of course, a really important part of any piece of written work, and actually, really, I suppose we're talking about essays and reports and things like that, is your conclusion. This is your final statement, your final opportunity to actually wrap up what you are saying, you know, to help the reader understand the context and the importance of your work in light of all the other things you have written. But you've got to do it correctly, because in that conclusion, you need to make sure that all the main points you've referred to in the rest of the work, you've gone over again and referred to. If you find any new bits that aren't already in the writing, then they're not supposed to be there, so get rid of them and rewrite the conclusion. Does it address the questions, the title, the aim, the actual premise of the work? You know, are you really wrapping up what you're trying to say? Are you giving the right context? And are you making your points clearly? That's really important, because a conclusion is really the final flourish of your written work, and it's got to be rounded off in a nice sentence that leaves the reader sort of fulfilled and understanding everything you've been trying to say. Now then, it's very important, and this is one thing that everybody does very badly, and that includes academics like myself, students at every level. Referencing seems to be a bit of a mystery. There's lots of different kinds of references, but the thing is, when you're writing, you don't know everything, and what you need to do, you need to substantiate your claims with the information where you found them from. All right, otherwise you are basically stealing somebody else's information, and that could be called plagiarism, and that is very bad indeed. So you must cite in the text using maybe the surname of the author, or of the book or scientific paper that you actually found the information from you're talking about, along with the date in brackets sometimes, depending on the system that you are using to actually cite that, because there's lots of them. As you see here, a really common type of citation system and referencing system is something called the Harvard system, and there's lots and lots of kinds of them. But you need to cite your sources and then put their references in a list at the end. Right? Every time you state a fact, every time you state a figure, if you use a picture, a graph, a statement, absolutely anything you need to show where you've got the sources from. And actually, it's a really nice way to show your work in light, critically, of other authors' statements or results. And it's particularly important in the sciences when you are writing. So really, it is all a matter of style. It's all about practice, and you will develop your own writing style over time. And the only way you can do that is by reading lots of different work around your subject area. And a really nice, neat way of doing it is actually to take a piece of work that you're really sort of buoyed up by, one that you're really interested in, is really easy to read, and then one that you find a bit confusing and a bit boring actually. Right? Read them both and then compare the writing style, the structure, and all of that sort of stuff. Right? And then you'll be able to map the differences between them and start to create your own style by emulating something that you like. Really, you just need to consider, right, your work in light of your findings, so of this actual comparison, and you will eventually develop your own writing style that hopefully will be accurate and engaging for your reader. So one thing you must absolutely do, and I have genuinely been learning this for years on bitter experience, to be very, very, very careful with my work. If you do not save your work, you will lose it. If you are writing a very long presentation, if you are writing a very long essay, a report, or something like that, I guarantee you something will go wrong at some point. Technology is not infallible, so you must prepare for the worst. And I've lost whole months worth of writing just in one power cut. Admittedly, it was a few years ago, but I certainly have, or on corrupt computer hard drives and things like that. So what you need to do is you need to back up your work on multiple devices as you are writing. You can email it yourself, because then it's up in the clouds then in some inbox somewhere. So if you have got some sort of cloud backup or something like that, you know, one of these Microsoft programs, then actually you can save your work there as you go, and it'll always be there just to grab again. What I like to do, and it's very old-fashioned, and actually I've put a question mark by this because maybe it's not ecologically sound anymore, is that I like to actually print the final version and then keep it, and of any sorts of parts of writing that I have, and then I've always got a hard copy, and if I need to write it, all I need to do is write it again. So if things can go wrong, they absolutely certainly will. So just a few final things to think about your writing then. Just make sure that the introduction and the conclusion They are good and well linked. Don't forget that actually the introduction is the first thing that somebody will read, and they'll start to get an impression of the actual content almost straight away. And the conclusion, of course, is the last thing that they'll read. And again, they develop an impression of the content of the whole body of work they have just read from that section. And if they go away feeling full up and nice and all good about what you've written, then you give a really good impression. Don't forget citations and references. This is very important, and it's something that you will be picked up on constantly if it's not done right. Be organised in your writing. Make sure it's got a good flow and all of the sections are there. Use subheadings if you need to allow text to be broken up so the reader doesn't have to struggle through whole massive swathes of text. And above all, don't leave anything to the last minute. Editing and proofreading can take a very long time. So leave yourself plenty of time before any deadline to be able to go through the process to make your work that little bit better. One thing I'll leave you with is this final rule, and it's one thing I think about every time I am writing. And this is never assume the reader knows what you mean. You are writing, you know what you mean, but the reader might know nothing about your subject area. So what you need to do, you need to qualify every example. You need to, say exactly what you mean all of the time. All right. It might seem a little bit arduous explaining yourself all the time, but it's something you absolutely need to do. So I really hope you find that useful. Writing is a very pleasurable experience. It's something that I really, really, really love. Writing, researching, even the drafting process. I really take a lot of benefit from. And if you submit a piece of work and get a fantastic grade, then how good is that going to be? I hope you find it useful. See you later.